You know what
Backpacking America
is, right?
It's fucking awesome.
It's Backpacking America, an analytical podcast. I'd like to introduce a new series called American Experimental Societies. I cover societies that were built in response to capitalism, influenced by acid, consumption, and many more motivating factors. But before we get into today's experimental society, Arcosanti, I also want to introduce Backpacking America's new segment, Have You Seen This?, where I share memes and other things I find funny or lighthearted. So before we get into it, have you seen this?
Get him, Bruce! He's getting away! Fuck. Oh, yeah, sure, Mom and Dad. I'll go to school, become a psychiatrist. Now look at me. I'm a fucking scarecrow, and I'm running away from a guy dressed as a bat. I should have just specialized in dance like I wanted to. Oh, this looks good. Oh, Batman never goes in alleyways.
That's enough. You're going to jail.
Well, guess who's gonna visit me in jail, Batman? My parents.
What? Parents?
Bruce! Dead parents. You let him get away? Oh my god, are you crying?
No, it's just raining.
Hey pizza lovers, I'm Dick, and I'm here to announce the grand opening of my brand new pizzeria, Dick's Pizza. Not sure how much dicks you can handle? No sweat, because even our smallest dicks are 10 inches long. Pardon? There's a bunch of dicks at your door, we deliver. So get off your computer and eat dicks. For more information, click here. It's big and it's gooey, it's saucy and it's chewy. What's in my mouth? It's gotta be dicks.
Paolo Soleri was an Italian-American architect that built Arcosanti in 1970. The town, which is still populated to this day, is located 70 miles north of Phoenix, Arizona. This town is special because Soleri envisioned a society where humanity will combine architecture and ecology to create a sustainable civilization with minimal destructive impact. Arcosanti is a blend of the Italian words cosa and anti, giving the town the meaning against things. This project not only was a response to environmental concerns towards human development, but also a response to rampant consumerism, hence arco, meaning architecture. In 1970, the work began with 8,000 dedicated and determined volunteers who sought to construct a society that was closer to nature and their community. Today, their mission is more relevant than ever. The board of Arcosanti still manages the project by committing itself to research about sustainable living and maintains the local residential population. So I think societies like this are really important because humanity really does need to look at different ways of expanding. I'm not one of those people that believes we have an overpopulation problem. In fact, most of our land isn't even used. You could actually concentrate all of humanity in Phoenix, Arizona. And it's actually ironic because this episode is in Phoenix. But it's true. You could concentrate all of humanity in that small little pocket if we use our building strategy correctly. I do have concerns with this idea, though. As much as I'm a proponent of eco-architecture and projects like Arcosanti, my issues with it are, well, this one's pretty COVID pertinent, but what about disease? Like, if we're going to have people so close together, right, like this really close-knit communal bond, what happens if a COVID-like disease or a plague-like disease spreads? If we're like on top of each other and supposed to work like this. And I did reach out to the community outreach director of Arcosanti to try and talk to him and maybe get some clarifications to these answers. So it'd be really great if he could come on the show in the near future. But until then, what happens with disease? I haven't really been able to find much about that. Like what like how are they managing COVID? Do they even care about masks? Are they very strict with it? You know, I want to know how this intense communal living gets affected by disease. And if it could be done, What would happen to current urban-style cities if this type of society became popular? Would we tear down these cities? Would we abandon them and let them rot and let nature retake them? I feel like what would end up happening is we'd mold these cities into becoming ecologically sustainable. We'd plant more trees. We'd maybe mandate that, apartments have to grow vegetables to meet up with food insecurity, maybe, and we'd give them seeds. Or we could, plant trees along the sidewalks and maybe on top of the roofs of apartment buildings where we plant massive trees, and maybe tear down abandoned industrial sections and just plant trees there if we're not going to revitalize industry. And if we are to revitalize industry, how would we do it in a eco-friendly way? Which is one of my other questions about a society like this. How would we manufacture things? A lot of these societies are not manufacturing societies, these experimental societies. They are more, this is not a makeshift society. A lot of American experimental societies were makeshift. But this one is not makeshift at all. This one was very meticulously planned. The issue is, how do they make goods? How do they produce things like laptops or radios or audio equipment? Things of these, like these technologically intensive things. How do we make them? How do we make cars? How do we make buses? How do we make planes, trains? How are we going to produce things? Especially, how are we going to do this ecologically? Now, some people could say we could produce things ecologically through, solar power or through wind power, and that's all fine, but, there's still going to be pollution coming out from factories. How do we make it so there isn't pollution? That's the main concern. Now, I think honestly, actually, I think I don't even know what I'm talking about there. I think if you do put solar panels on top of factories to power it, then the amount of emissions is reduced drastically. Okay, yeah, so that could work. Because the thing is, with factories, you do need ventilation, and we can't just get rid of factories because then we can't make things. Unless we somehow make things that last thousands of years and we could just tinker it and pass it down generation to generation, but that's not going to happen. And then this leads to the next thing about, would public transit exist? And if so, how? Because if we can't produce, if we're not going to be an industrialized society, because some of these societies that we're going to be looking at were not industrial based. They did not agree with industrialization. They hated industrialization. So, if a society that doesn't like industrialization was to win out, if that model was to win out, would we go back to pastoralization? Would we go back to an agrarian-based society with guild masters and, artisans again? I personally don't think that's possible. That goes against the Marxian worldview of social development, where it's feudalism, capitalism, socialism, communism. I don't think you can go that far back. We've seen communist countries go back to capitalist countries. We've seen them revert in the case of the Soviet Union and the Eastern Bloc, but we haven't seen capitalism retreat back to feudalism. And that's not really possible unless there was a nuclear annihilation. So this is kind of a very long-winded thing to answer, would public transit exist? And I think it would if it's in a grander scheme of things. It's going to require manufacturing. And can this manufacturing meet the demand while also being ecologically sustainable? Would there be cars even? Would there be private transport? I don't think there would be if this model wins out, because a specific complaint of Paolo was the stretch, the urban sprawl and the highways that entrap the city and run through it. I think that was... So he would avoid private transit just because he hated highways. Or if there was private transit, it would be very minimal. And of course, these transit would have to be solar paneled in order to prevent pollution, rather private pollution. So I don't think there would be cars in a society like this. That I can answer, and I think there would be a focus on public transportation. And then, of course, there's hospitals, right? in this society that we're looking at, Arcosanti, we don't see hospitals. Like I don't think there's a mention of a doctor or a hospital or anything. So how would we build hospitals to be ecologically sustainable? Now, I'm not sure this is, a difficult thing to do. I'm sure it's a relatively simple thing, especially if, I sit down with one of these people and they explain to me the nature of their construction and their motivation. And what's interesting about this place too is you can actually visit it, like is a hotel basically, and they have a visitor center open that you can just kind of visit, and it's encouraged that the public kind of view it. I think I'm actually gonna pull up some pictures too. I saw a few pictures of it, and it looked very beautiful. But yeah, it's these very intricate concrete slab buildings, and it looks like this is an amphitheater I'm looking at right now. Yeah, they have a theater, they have a swimming pool, and their buildings are just very they remind me of eco-brutalism, eco-brutalist style, but this actually looks fun. It's a beautiful project. I think it's great that these places exist. It's just they give more questions than answers. It seems like it's one giant apartment complex or multiple. Actually, yeah, it looks like it's multiple apartment complexes, and then there's a camp for construction personnel to keep building onto it, right below the permanent structures. And it looks over this the steppes in the desert, the steppes in the Arizona desert, and there's nothing but just like clear blue sky and cloud, some clouds and stuff, but mostly a blue sky. And if there are clouds, they're big puffy ones, and the grass is like this dark green, and in the middle of it, in the left foreground of this image I'm looking at, it's Arcosanti, and it's just this concrete eco-brutalist structure. It doesn't have plants growing up the walls or anything, but it's just a very simple yet intricate. It's simple in material, but intricate in design. It's multiple configurations of rectangles and squares with, and it's tiered too. Like it kind of goes down in 3 different levels. It seems to be like 3 or 4 stories, and it's got like rectangular windows, and the walls are just faded sun faded concrete. It's almost has like an orange tinge. It almost blends in with the wildlife there. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just a lot of squares and rectangles, but it looks beautiful. And it still exists today since 1970. Societies like this are very important, but what these societies fail to realize is, oh wow, this is actually the whole panoramic of it. Yeah, there's multiple structures. There's even like these half circles in the middle of the ground, and like then there's some more scientific looking buildings made of the same material with these like slanted windows going into the ground. Then at the foot of it, there's another apartment complex. It looks actually like a regular apartment complex, but it's made of concrete and the same simple material. And then there's multiple layers of steps with roads. But as I was saying, like a lot of these smaller societies, they fail to realize that capitalism cannot be convinced. It can only be abolished. And I feel that even though they make a very pertinent case, it's not profitable at this time to build societies like this. And it leaves way more questions than there are answers. Because already it's like I've asked more questions than I've given answers or definitions in this episode, which is very off par for a Backpacking America episode. So it's almost like there's this predicament where do we take a blind leap of faith, or do we research more? And I personally think that we need to research more, and I think the board of Arcosanti feels the same way, where it's like, how do we respond to the demands and concerns of a 2020 American population as opposed to that of the 20th century? And they are really taking a proactive stance in that. They fired their president and they hired a new, basically a whole new board and new leadership, and they're really committing themselves to solving the issues of the day. And I'm sure COVID and disease are high on there. I just haven't found the answer to this yet because there's very little written about it. It says here that there's a Guardian piece on it. And that's all I've seen so far is from the Guardian about Arcosanti. And it's part of their Story of Cities series. This is number 35, The Unfinished Answer to Suburban Sprawl. Yeah, and now there's 5,000. Oh, it doesn't say there's 5,000 people living there. I almost misread. Almost made a mistake. 46 years on, the project is 3% complete. So today it's only 46% complete, 3% complete, I'm sorry. And it's only home to a part-time community of around 50 people and intermittent workshoppers who have to drive to the supermarket to get their supplies and enjoy the comfort of mains, electricity, and heating. But diggers still trundle across the site, and volunteers can occasionally be seen hauling buckets of concrete to and fro. They're still building, according to Jeff Stein, the avuncular 64-year-old co-president of the Arcosanti Foundation, the organization that looks after the project, gesturing to a group of students busy manhandling a new gray water recycling tank into a place a little way down the hill. Oh, now this is just getting into it. So he says that eventually, we might not reach 5,000 people, but we're growing slowly, and the production of wind bells is quite difficult to support the development of a new town. So they're trying to do this completely ecologically friendly and ethically consciousness. So I give them a lot of props for that. I think that is one of the best ways to go about this. And, if they are doing something revolutionary and they are trying to make a stand and a difference in responding to capitalist consumerism found in the way our cities are laid out, I think this is the best way to do it. And it highlights a lot of issues that do come with building one of these new societies, which is really starting from nothing. And also using experimental modern tools, meaning wind turbines and the wind bells, as he was saying, and volunteer work, and using ideology and dream to motivate the production of a society rather than pure survival, and using any technology necessary to get done with it. The motivations of these societies are completely different than original human society. Original human society, when we first made our first cities, it was, we need to build to live. Now this is, we need to build to live differently, but we know we have the option to go back to our comfort, the lives of American comfort and leisure. And I think that is one of the biggest threats to building a society like this, because we're naturally selfish people. And I think it's just, you have to fight the temptation to really have dedicated, ideologically driven people to finish a project like this. And I think that it's wonderful they're doing this, and there needs to be more of it. It's just going to take a long time before we actually see the results of it. But even so, the results we're seeing now from just 3% of construction already answers some questions of mine of how things would be produced. And it looks like industry would be done through minimal amount of emissions. They still have to use excavators, but it would be very minimal amounts of emission to build these structures, and these structures seem to be powered by solar and wind. So that answers what was the one? I wrote down all the questions. Yep, it answers how would we manufacture things, and then of course public transit would exist through that. so minimal emissions, and it would be through solar and wind power. So yeah, that was Arcosanti. I highly encourage you to check out their website, which I'll put in the description of the podcast. Make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, and spread the word of Arcosanti and Backpacking America. Until next time. Thanks for listening, y'all. Make sure to give BPA a follow on Instagram at Backpacking America and Twitter at BPA Podcasting. Make sure to like BPA on Facebook and subscribe on YouTube. The links can be found in the podcast description. Until then, take it easy and stay breezy.